Joining me now is Michael Yon. He is in the Panama Canal. Here's the headline today. China delays $23 billion sale of Panama Canal port to U.S.-backed consortium led by BlackRock. What does all this mean? Let's find out from the man who's there right next to the Panama Canal, Michael Yon. Hey, Michael, how you doing?
Hola, another day in paradise. And that green screen behind me is actually, I got a helicopter and it got over right behind my neck here is the China Bridge. Let me
Wow.
fucking my pointer right. That's it right there. Right there. Right, yeah. And across from that, okay, over here, wrong way, is that is one of the ports in question, right? So the BlackRock you can't see it very well, but actually in the photo it's high resolution. But that's one of the ports. It's actually that BlackRock is trying to buy. Hutchison Whampoa, of course, has it, and here in Panama, that's called Balboa Port, right? And so here we call it Balboa, and so that's it. And as you know, on about Friday, that got nixed, or at least say put on hold. You got to keep in mind, China is not new here, and I just bought 5 books the other day. In fact, I just bought a duplicate copy of them about 30 minutes ago to give to somebody else. It's 5 books written by Chinese that are explaining how, 3 centuries of relations with Panama and that sort of thing, which is nonsense. Chinese Communist Party hasn't had 3 centuries of relations with anybody. But the bottom line is China is thick in here. They're very, they're involved in so many things, and it's not new. For instance, I found the other day a note from 1881, which I bought it. I bought it from an antique store, and it's from the Qing Dynasty consulate or embassy in Cuba, in Havana. It's vouching to the Cuban government that some guy named Jose Folk is actually Chinese, right? So I found it in an old bookstore and art store, and I bought it. That was 1881 with, Qing Dynasty relations with Cuba. So a lot of the invasion operations that go on through the Darien Gap to the United States, by the way, they are coordinated by the Chinese through Cuba, and through their Cuba embassy. So I mean, there's a lot going on here. They have a long history here, and China is invading thick. One thing that's of very serious interest, and now maybe 1 out of 10,000 people are going to track with me on what I'm going to say next, which is that Panama City is sister cities with Nanjing. Now, I think maybe 1 out of 10,000 people are going to go and light up on that and go, hey, that's interesting, and they will know why. Well, I happen to have researched this specifically, and I was in Nanjing in 2016 researching it, and I've written 3 books on Chinese information war that are only in Japanese, and those books were largely about the Comfort Women information operation and the Rape of Nanjing information operation, right? And so why is Panama a sister city with Nanjing when Nanjing's not even a port city, right? And so, again, I went there in 2016 to Nanjing researching this, but I think the reasons are pretty apparent for those 1 out of 10,000 people who will have studied this enough to know. Even 1 out of 10,000 educated people are going to have a hard time tracking on this, but just write it down, and I think you'll see it come to pass. The top 3 customers through the Panama Canal in order are United States, China, and Japan is number 3. Now, I know how China rolls. China cheats on everything, and they use information war, the constant I'm a victim, to extort, right? And they're doing that with Japan now, right? That's already been very effective with the Comfort Women issue with Korea and Japan, with the court decisions in 2019 and 20 and on and on. But when it comes to the sister city being Nanjing with Panama City, I'll guarantee you, just write it down and let's see if I'm right. Eventually, if China were to get control of Panama and the canal, not just the canal, United States just wants control of the canal, not of Panama. But China wants control over the Americas, like from the tip to the tip, right? And they're very clear about that. They don't hide it. But if China gets control of the Panama Canal, they will strangle Japan with it. Absolutely strangle Japan. Because they'll say, well, look what you did at Nanjing. Rape of Nanjing, you owe us a lot of money. Or your ships can't go through, right? That's what they'll do with it. Masako Ganaha was doing an interview earlier this morning, well, 3:30 in the morning, her time, in Japan just hours ago, and she was talking with Emerald Robinson, and Masako in Japan and Tokyo, she was saying, she hopes the United States gains control over the canal because it so directly affects Japan. And she's right. She's absolutely right. Because China will use that. Right now, it still remains a neutral canal. It was neutral when the United States had it, and it's now neutral. Let me tell you, this is very important. In one of these books, I don't have them here. One of these books, it's written in Spanish, but China is bragging about using the United Nations in 1964, and there's photos in there of helping the revolution in Panama to take the canal away from the United States, and which eventually happened, of course, with Carter and all that. But China's bragging about how their communists were helping the communists in Panama to take away the canal and give it to Panama. Let me tell you how this works. And they're bragging about using the United Nations, who has a headquarters right down the street from me, which is our old U.S. Army South headquarters. United Nations has it now. So what they're bragging about, the Chinese are bragging about in the Spanish language book, is that they use the United Nations to take the canal away to give it to Panama. But how they operate is they will then take it from the Chinese will then take it from Panama. They're doing the same with Diego Garcia. I've said this over and over through time. China is going for Diego. They're using the United Nations to take Diego Garcia from the weak United Kingdom and give Diego Garcia to Mauritius. Once Mauritius has Diego Garcia, which is an atoll out there where our B-2s are parked right now, apparently. Once Mauritius has it, China can take it, just like China can take the canal from Panama, just slowly but surely. The way that China generally does these things is they just grow over you like kudzu, right? Like when I was in Hong Kong, the main weapon that China used to take Hong Kong was, information war and weaponized migration. They were just bringing in drip by drop mainlanders to go settle in Hong Kong, and they took key positions as teachers, policemen, and that sort of thing. That's the Craw Isthmus, right? I'm sorry. Okay. I'm sorry. There's Panama. You got it turned. Yeah. Anyway, and so I wish I had a pointer. But in any case, for a moment it struck me as. But anyways, the Isthmus of Panama. That's not the way it's situated. Actually, the long axis of the north-south is not aligned on that map that's floating right there. The long axis of Panama is more east-west than north-south. Like the Panama Canal actually doesn't go east-west. The Panama Canal goes mostly north-south. So in the green screen behind me, the ocean that the canal is dumping out into is the Pacific. And when Balboa came, he spotted the Pacific and he called it the South Sea because it was south of Panama, right? So the black circle there is the port, one of the ports in question. That's the Hutchison-Whampoa port that BlackRock wants to buy. The Panamanians call it Balboa Port, and on Friday, that got nixed. The red circle is the bridge that China is building over the canal. I shot this photo. I got a helicopter and flew over the canal a few weeks ago, and I should have circled it better, but I think I was sending that to you quickly. I may have still been in the airplane or the helicopter. But that port right there, as you can see, is key. Now, I want to repeat, Panama does not actually, China doesn't actually operate the canal. They don't actually operate the locks and all that. The ports are separate. The canal, look at the canal like it's a highway. That's what it is, right? And the like say I-75 or I-10 or whatever, I-4, the road is operated by the state or the federals, right? In the United States, and the canal is operated by the Panamanians. But those ports on either side are operated, they're leased out, right? And so the Chinese have ports on each end of the canal, and they need to be gone. No doubt about it. They should not. Can you go back to that bridge? Can you go back to the bridge? That's very important. Did I take this photo?
This one here?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. You see that red circle on the lower left?
Yeah.
Right. Okay. That's China Bridge. And now keep in mind, if you look up Chinese bridge collapses, you'll be busy for the next couple hours reading about Chinese bridges collapsing and buildings. You saw that earthquake that just happened in Bangkok, right? And that building collapsed. That was a Chinese construction. And thousands of other buildings in Bangkok just did what? Did not collapse. So thousands of other buildings did not collapse, but the one built by the Chinese is laying in dust.
Why?
Right?
Why?
Because they're Chinese. I mean, and I've been all over China. I mean, seriously. I mean, bottom line. I mean,
So they're good at food, but not at building.
They're good at fraud. They're extremely good at fraud. And none of this trust but verify nonsense. Zero trust. Always. That's why I've told Trump administration. I've told key people in it numerous times, including again today. We need to stop construction on that bridge right now. We need to stop construction on this bridge, and we need to put American engineers down there, or Japanese, or American and Japanese, but not Chinese and not anybody else. It has to be somebody serious.
Are you making a prediction now that if China is allowed to build that bridge, that it won't be a sound long-term structure?
No way. No way. I mean, people are constantly taking bets that, Three Gorges Dam's going to break any season, They just don't look. Their buildings collapse all the time.
So the no way was that you're not taking the bet. The no way is there's no way that if they finish building it, it will last long term.
They just do fraud. I mean, that's just what they do. It's alligators eat meat and Chinese do fraud. I mean, that's just the way it is, right? And the construction materials, they cannot be allowed to build that bridge. They've already built one. That thing can collapse. Look, we just had an earthquake last week. I was sitting at this table, started to shake, and you can look it up online, USGS. It was a 6.2 or something, and my water starts to shake, and I'm seeing it start to move a little bit. I'm like, wow, there's a earthquake apparently. And luckily it didn't continue. But I'm right by the canal. And keep in mind, I looked up on the USGS last night. There's been maybe, I don't know, a dozen over 7 in the region in the last about 100 years. I mean, this is an active zone, right? And so the construction on this, listen, there's 7 major naval choke points in the world, 7 that are absolutely vital. And this is number 1 for us. For the United States, this is our definite, the most important for us is right here. And there's 6 more in the world that are just top level importance, like the Suez Canal, of course, Bab el-Mandeb, Strait of Hormuz, Strait of Malacca, Strait of Gibraltar, and Turkish Straits or Bosphorus, whatever you want to call it.
Let me read this one. The United States is the single largest user of the Panama Canal, a crucial artery for global trade. Approximately 73% of all traffic through the canal involves cargo either originating from or destined for U.S. ports. This translates to about 40% of all U.S. container traffic transiting the waterway annually, representing a staggering $270 billion in cargo each year. The relationship between the U.S. and the Panama Canal is not just one of convenience, but a deeply intertwined economic and logistical partnership that has shaped trade routes and global commerce for over a century. So there's a lot of our goods that we get. 40% of all U.S. container traffic. Okay, so 73% of all traffic through the canal involves cargo either originating from or destined for U.S. ports. 73%. So if this were to get shut down, this would have a big time impact on our just-in-time inventory, right, Michael? Huge. I mean,
That's why I've spent a year here since Biden was installed. A year. If I spend a year in your country or someplace like that, you should be paying attention. You might be actually thinking about buying more insurance or leaving. You know what I mean? I go to where the action is. I mean, and I as soon as Biden was installed, I went right to Texas to the border and then to Colombia and the Darien Gap, and then came straight here to Panama, the Darien Gap and the canal. And I've been going back and forth, Darien Gap Canal, Darien Gap Canal. You know, since Biden was installed, I've spent a year here doing that and studying this to the nth degree, because I was like, something's going to happen here. I feel it in me bones. I've done this enough. I've studied enough around the world. You know, I've taken Masako in the last 4 years to 30 countries researching this. We went to Strait of Malacca. We went to Kra Isthmus. We went to all the.
For those who don't know who that is, who is she?
She's a Japanese journalist and very serious researcher, and she was on with Emerald Robinson earlier talking about the farmer protest yesterday that was in Japan. She was there live streaming it, and so she studies food issues. She studies the logistics. She's been into the Darien Gap 12 or 15 times with me and others. She's about to fly back to Panama and go back to the Darien and look at the canal more, because she realizes how important this is for Japan. This canal is absolutely vital to Japan. It's vital to the United States. It's our artery right here. You know who gets this to the nth degree is Mike Flynn. Mike Flynn is what you say, the Panama Canal, and his ears go right up. He is absolutely focused on this, right? But most of Americans don't get it. They don't realize if this thing is shut down, and it can happen accidentally. You know, this thing opened in 1914. It is a marvel. It's not just a path between the seas, although there's an excellent book called The Path Between the Seas. I highly suggest you read it. And it's up there with Creature from Jekyll Island, actually. But it's about the creation of the Panama Canal. It's very sophisticated work, not just the canal, but we created Panama, the country, to create the canal. You can't make up the stuff. This was very sophisticated. I've got stacks of the old books from the 1800s here of our surveys and maps. I've got hundreds of the maps here. It's unbelievable. The surveys that were going on and looking for the right type of coal out in the jungle and everything else. But so we put a huge amount into this that came before the canal. I've got all the Nicaragua books and the surveys. Our Navy's out in the jungle, and they're trying to decide where to make it, Nicaragua or here or some other places they looked at. And finally it came down between Panama and Nicaragua. And there was a big information war at the time trying to push it to Panama, because some people wanted it in Nicaragua, but Nicaragua also is highly active, and there's, for instance, the Nicaraguan Canal, if it's ever built, goes through Lake Nicaragua. And I've been there before. There's two volcanoes in the middle of that lake or not in the middle, but in the lake, called Amontepe. It's two volcanoes. I spent, I don't know, maybe more than a week. There it is. Yeah, this is the Panama Canal, right? And so the thing is we ended up building it here because people were doing it information. They had, volcanoes erupting on postage stamps and things, trying to push people out of Nicaragua to do it here. We finally did it here, and that's actually a hotel on the left, and that's one of the only hotels that's actually got any kind of decent view of the canal, actually, believe it or not. There's another one, a Holiday Inn over in the United Nations headquarters area of Ciudad del Saber, and those are the only two hotels that really have a okay look at the canal. It's quite strange, actually. And so that there's not like a massive hotel overlooking the canal. It'd be a massive draw. But that hotel on the left has got an okay view. And but in any case, we built the canal here, and people have been concerned for years that a volcano, or not a volcano, but an earthquake could disrupt it, and all kinds of other things could disrupt it. Another thing that could disrupt it would be the Chinese building a bridge over it, and then the bridge collapses over the canal, right? Or a ship runs into one of the abutments of their, I mean, look at how they're building the canal there. And this thing is and they're building also a train underneath. I don't think people are really worried about the train very much because Japanese are working on that, and nobody's stressed out about Japanese. But if Japanese were building that bridge, I'd be like, that's great, build the bridge.
And don't forget, we had the, what was that, the bridge in the Baltimore Harbor, right? That ship,
Yep.
I don't know if someone hijacked that ship electronically, remotely, and turned it into that bridge and did that. But looky there. I don't know if that was a test. I don't know if that was a warning. I don't know if that was a signal. But you're saying, what if someone were to do something funny with that bridge there or in the canal?
Or just, again, there was an earthquake that I felt just like, look it up, USGS. It was like, I don't know, a week or so ago. I was sitting at this table and it happened, right? So, I mean, this is an active area. And China is just terrible at making stuff. They're really good at fraud is what they're good at. They're very good at fraud.
You mentioned they're good at fraud, but what if this, let's say that we've just moved a lot of, I guess, hardware, ships and whatnot out of the Indo-Pacific, headed to the Middle East. They're probably in the Middle East now. If we were to have a strike between America and Israel on Iran, and we're distracted with that, and this would open up a door for China to put an embargo around Taiwan or just go for occupation. And we decide now we're somehow going to, I don't know how much we can do in 2 theaters, but if we were to decide we're going to somehow get involved in that, then come to their defense, what could you see China doing when it comes to the Panama Canal to weaken America, hurt America, cause America to suffer? Because you and I know that one way to get Americans to put pressure on their political leaders is, well, for instance, the unions. President Trump, I think, has just signed an executive order. He wants to deal with the unions, and when it comes to government unions, because I'm sure he knows that government unions can call strikes and impact critical infrastructure. We know that communists can infiltrate a union and then call for a strike, and then your garbage gets picked up, and then it starts piling up at the street, or other services get disrupted. So the one way to put pressure on an elected official is all of a sudden have a critical infrastructure bottleneck collapse, and then use that pressure of the American people not getting stuff, not getting things they need to say, hey, and that is a political backfire for that leader. Could you see China, if there's skirmishes with Taiwan between Russia, the U.S. and China over Taiwan, could you see China somehow doing something in the Panama Canal to create trouble for America and Americans?
They already did. They used the United Nations to take the canal and put their headquarters in our former U.S. Army South headquarters at Fort Clayton, which is now Ciudad. They already took the canal. China already took the canal and helped take the canal and give it to Panama. And the weak and idiotic Americans who went along with this, maybe they had video. They didn't have video back then. Maybe they had films, or they took money, or I don't know. But maybe they fell into one of those mice traps: money, ideology, coercion, ego. I don't know. Somehow they got people like Carter. He wasn't the only one to give the canal away. And now the canal is in Panamanian hands, ripe to be taken eventually by China, right? And I was just down in Argentina with Masako. We're looking at the bioceanic corridor that China's building down there between Brazil and goes through Argentina and over to Chile, right? And I mean, there's a lot going on. I mean, we could talk about it for hours.
So let me ask you this then: what would that look like? If play it out. If you had to war table this, if you're going to do an exercise. Something happens with Taiwan, with China, where we get involved. How does China respond? What would you see them being able to do with the assets they have on the ground there? Do they have enough assets on the ground to physically take control of the day-to-day operation of the canal?
Taking control of the canal, that would be difficult. Disrupting it, I mean, that could be difficult because we could easily then take the canal out. All right? If they're not letting us through, but they're using their own ships to come through, it would be simple for us to take it out. But that would be catastrophic for our economy. And think about that. One little canal could be catastrophic for our economy. That's a big deal.
When you say catastrophic, explain what that looks like for the average American.
Look what you just saw on the thing that you put up on the screen, 73% of the cargo going through, was it $270 billion a year, right?
Yep.
So it's and also our Navy needs to be able to get through faster. And also there's another thing that's important. A lot of the cargo that can go through there, like food, it can't just reroute because a lot of the cargo has a shelf life on it, right? And so it can't, if it has to go around South America, which would be a lot more expensive, it also, well, a lot of that stuff, some things like electronics could go around the South America, but you wouldn't want to do that with some agricultural products. So there's all kinds of issues like this. At the end of the day, the United States, we gave up this canal, but it was the absolute wrong thing to do, and China helped take it away.
So we need to get it back. Is that what you're saying?
We need to take it back.
How do you do that? I mean,
well,
the deal with BlackRock was just shot down. So what's Trump's next move?
Not that I know. A lot of the Americans here, like a lot of the Zonians I've been talking with, they're afraid BlackRock will get it. They don't want China here. Nobody wants China here. But then BlackRock is all about keeping the Darien Gap open and letting the invasion continue. And BlackRock is DEI jab pushing, right? So so a lot of the Americans are now very concerned. They're like, we're in a rock and a hard space here. It's China or BlackRock. I mean,
pick your poison, right? Pick your poison.
Yeah, I mean, and so what are you to do? In warfare, you go for the near enemy. The near enemy in this case would be BlackRock. I mean, you don't want them. That's closer to you. BlackRock is, I mean, China has huge influence around the United States, but BlackRock is, I mean, yeah.
But wasn't President Trump, wasn't he backing the BlackRock acquisition?
100%. 100%. And BlackRock is all about keeping the borders open.
Were you warning your contacts in the Trump administration you don't want BlackRock doing this?
I don't think they need the warning. These people are highly sophisticated people. I mean, they're on the same yachts. You know what I mean?
But yet President Trump was for it, you're saying.
Openly. I mean, he talked about it during his speech, that he gave, a few weeks ago.
So why was he for it if you and many others are concerned about BlackRock? Why would he be for it? What's his strategy?
I can't read his mind, but the thing is BlackRock wants to keep the borders open, and it's very important because the compass needles that I'm seeing on the borders. Now I see a lot of people writing other things that he's getting control of the border. I'm not seeing that. What I'm seeing is he's turned down the spigot for a while. He's not ripping up the infrastructure for the invasions. For instance, in Darien, they're looking at potentially increasing the size of the camps down there. Why would you do that? Now, people who've never been there and know nothing about this jump on it and say, well, he's going to use those camps to send people home, which makes zero sense. People that I've taken down there and they realize that they're talking about building up those camps, every single one of them has gone, that doesn't make any sense at all, even for deportations, right? It makes zero sense.
So why is it happening?
I think if I'm just to read the evidence, looking at the evidence, it looks to me like the invasions will continue at a high rate in the future because there's been no effort to defund the United Nations, and threats don't matter. Threats mean nothing.
But why would President Trump allow that to happen or even want it to happen? Isn't that against his entire policy?
No, because I'm just reading the evidence, and the evidence is clear. The door is unlocked. It's like, lock the door and defund the United Nations. Defund the United Nations, start investigating and arresting some of these people. Get them out of New York. Get them out of the United States. Defund them. The main funder of the United Nations is United States. The main people doing the invasions is the United Nations and the United States openly together. Our flag is flying in the Darien camps right now, today. Our flag, it's not actually flying, it's just painted on stuff. Those
are the DHS, UN, DHS camps, the white camps that you've been to, that you've talked to us about now for several years. And you're saying that now under the Trump administration, they're getting built bigger. That's what you're saying.
They're not building them bigger yet, but definitely they're kicking. I know the right people. They're kicking around tires about expanding the camps down there. And why would they do that? Why?
Now, does President Trump know this, you think? I mean, he's one guy trying to do a lot of things to turn this Titanic. Do you think if he were to tune in tonight, he'd be shocked by what you just said?
Well, Homan knows. I mean, I've told him, Homan, multiple times. He knows. And I think Homan wants to dismantle everything. Everything I've heard about Homan is he wants to come in with a sledgehammer and do his job.
But the problem with Tom Homan, I understand, is he doesn't really have any funding. He's been appointed the czar, but he has no staff and no funding, and I don't even know if he has an office, does he?
So basically, he's got a crown and he's got no army. Right? It's like, and
that's because Congress has to approve that, right?
I don't know what the holdup is, but I know what it translates down to here on the ground. And on the ground, it translates that gap is not only is it wide open, the camps, Anthony Rubin and Carlos Arella were just down in Colombia. You know how those guys are.
Yep.
They don't play around. And they were down there checking out Colombia for quite a while again. They were giving me daily updates. All the facilities are open in Colombia, and all the facilities are open here in Panama. And the United Nations is still operating. Why? Unless you were going to continue to do this, why would you keep the engines running, right?
But I got to ask you, why do you think? Why do you think? Who is it? Is it people that have gotten into the administration that are going to try to convince President Trump we need the cheap labor? What?
BlackRock, Larry Fink said explicitly about 2 weeks ago or so on a press conference, he wants the cheap labor. He said it explicitly.
There you go.
And that's not exactly verbatim, but it's getting pretty close. And if you find that press conference, Larry Fink talks about Panama Canal and talks about, migration, quote unquote. He's straight up. They're DEI guys, they want to keep the invasion going. And keep in mind, this is extremely important, what I'm about to say. This is life and death important. It's not minorly extremely important, like you might lose your fortune. No, you'll lose your life, right? You'll lose your life. You'll lose your whole town and everybody, your family gone, right? This migration thing is actual war. Look, Ireland's getting knocked in the head right now. And Masako and I were there like 3 years ago warning about Ireland, right? Sweden, the whole works, right? United States clearly is under attack. The United Nations must be defunded, period. If you do not do that, you are not serious. I was publishing this in advance before the inauguration.
But you were saying it on our show. You were saying it on our show.
And I agree. Saying it for years.
I agree. I agree.
If you don't 100%. Go, if people are like, now we have to make a plan. Plan? We know the plan. It was planned in black and white in the 1950s. Take out the United Nations. Defund them. That's the only plan you need. You defund them and you start shutting down their operations and you start investigating and arresting people that are involved in these things.
Yeah, well, we know the UN is full of Islamists and Marxist globalists who want to bring down America. They openly stated they want world government. I mean, we go there, you find the pagan occultic prayer room that was the brainchild of the mother of the New Age movement, Alice Bailey, who had multiple demons she wrote her books with. I mean, it's an evil, evil organization. They're the ones, the UN, that gave us, of course, Sustainable Development, Agenda 21 in 1992, the Earth Summit in Rio, and now called Agenda 2030, which is basically world socialism or big government, big business merged together, the Klaus Schwab agenda. It's Klaus Schwab's wife that was in charge of one of the agencies in the UN to implement the Sustainable Development Goals. It's the UN that put on the ID 2020 conference at the UN that wants all of us chipped like a bunch of cattle. So you and I have been singing this same song right now, I think, probably about 3+ decades when it comes to the UN. Now, when it comes to Larry Fink, you said find that video. I think we found it. Let's play it and get Michael's response.
In terms of infrastructure investing and maybe misrepresented in the press the notion that BlackRock had bought the Panama Canal. I think you've tried to correct that impression and also making it clear that it wasn't just, first it was ports, and it wasn't just Panama. So tell us what you've done and why you've done it.
Well, first of all, my kids called me and said, BlackRock bought the Panama Canal, can we go on it? And I said, we did not buy the Panama Canal. This is something we've been working with the seller, Hutchison Whampoa, for some time, but it was a very concentrated period, about 2 weeks, where they they've been faced with a very poor stock price for some time. From our estimates, Hutchison was trading at 30% of book. And they decided, after much deliberation, to see what the market would take related to selling their 44 ports in 32 countries. I mean, there are 6 of the ports are in the Suez Canal. No one ever mentions that one, or all the other ports that are around there.
6 just in the Suez Canal.
Yeah. But through through GIP, which is a company we bought last year, there is a partnership between GIP, BlackRock, and the largest shipping company in the world. And they own a port company called Till. We had the most strategic, I would say, partnership to build this out. And through this acquisition, we are going to have 100 ports in our portfolio. And we look at this as a real milestone and a real opportunity. Unfortunately, the far left and the far right didn't mention that we bought 44 ports. They mentioned we bought 2. And so the total consideration, I would say the 2 ports in Panama represent about 4% of the total consideration value of that transaction. But that's another great example of private capital coming there. The amount of demand that we have heard from our LPs, our co-investors across the board, I believe we probably could syndicate this about 3 times.
Are ports a good business?
It's a great, stable business. If you believe that the world can grow at 2 or 3%, maybe 3.5% a year, that means even with tariffs and other things, it means the ports are going to be quite active, and they're going to throw off, as I said, 15, 16 type of percent return.
Well, 15, 16% type of return. Wow.
And if he's accurate on that, but you're actually, more importantly, in the Panama aspect, and he's like, people don't talk about the other port. Well, this is the Panama Canal, okay? Anything on the Panama Canal instantly will have more significant, like these bridges. If these bridges were in the bayou of Louisiana,
right,
they wouldn't be as important as they are when they're over the Panama Canal. If this Chinese bridge was being built somewhere in the backwoods of Arkansas, well, it would be important because it's the United States. But it wouldn't rise to the level that it would get my attention. It gets my attention because it's over the Panama Canal, right? And so even if this was in Baltimore, it wouldn't rise to the level of getting my attention. But the Panama Canal does. This is absolutely vital to the United States, and he knows that. And again, this bridge, when it's finished, will go right to the port, one of the ports that BlackRock wants to buy.
Wow. I think I just found the clip on the cheap labor. Let's see, Logan, if this is it. Here we go.
So for the short term, it's really shortage of workers.
Shortage of workers. But I believe one of the reasons why we had 20 years of deflationary pressures, which obviously harmed a lot of U.S. workers, but those deflationary pressures were because we had the ability to import quite a bit overseas. And that's what kept prices down for so long. The themes today are very different. As we started focusing on more, I would say, focusing on how to build our economies, and each country are trying to think about how do we build a more robust economy, we're walking away with some of the themes that really kept inflation contained or down. And I think if we all are becoming a little more nationalistic, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but it does resonate with me that it's going to have elevated inflation. When I go to Washington, when they talk about these policies, I ask, at what cost are you willing to tolerate that? Yes, we may have more opportunities to create better and more robust jobs, but then the offside of that will be, it will create probably a little more elevated inflation in the short run.
Right. So we obviously a lot of conversations here this morning through the conference about AI, but I don't think anybody is raise the question that you raised about the deflationary impacts of AI over time. Maybe you might share your thinking on that.
Well, I mean, if you see the advancements that what AI and robotics can do, it's going to change almost every business that we could think of. It's going to change, if you're just witnessing what's going on in Ukraine related to war and how war is being fought through drones, or how Israel was so successful in Lebanon with Hezbollah. You're seeing how technology even changes war. And I think this is going to be an accelerant. And I think President Trump and how they are re-looking at all the agencies right now, this is going to be, if you could overlay what technology can do, we probably need fewer people. It's going to change everything. And if you think about if war is fought in a whole different manner than we are used to, do we need as many people in our military going forward, or do we need a different type of person? And you can take that in every different business across the board, how that translates and how that transforms. I was with a CEO, an Asian CEO that builds phones, and they're now applying AI robots, robots that have much more tensile dexterity, that they believe over the course of the next 2 years, their workforce will be down 30% with the advent of more technology and more robotics. And you translate that across all the economies, everything, we're going to have shortages of jobs in some things, like I said, in construction and with electricians, and we're going to have job changes in many other industries that robots through AI are going to supply.
Okay, so why do they need more cheap labor in here if he's saying we're going to go to more AI? Why do these go?
It does not compute, does it? It only computes when you look at the other things that they're doing, which is, listen, they are super globalists. They don't view the United States the way we do, like it's our country. It's our country, right? We defend for them, it's just another farm. It's another property. It's a property, just like the people that they buy constantly. They're just properties. They call them properties. I mean, they'll call a lot of these super bloggers and stuff. They call them properties. Joe Rogan is somebody's property, right? He's not his self, right? So that they buy. They can buy those $23 billion worth of ports. That's pocket lint to these guys, right? That's nothing. And so they don't view the United States the way we do. They view it as another farm. We can just terraform it with anthropologically and get rid of the people that are in the way, like these unions that they hate, of course. And one way to get rid of the unions is to do the ultimate union busting, which is to basically kill everybody, right? And I mean, straight up, hardcore. Look, they got everybody taking the jabs and all these other things. It's very clear eventually we're going to have food problems. It's crystal clear that the conditions continue to accrue for famines. And when I first started saying this 5 years ago, people again were like, "That's crazy. There's never going to be any famines in the United States." And don't you understand we're the number one food exporter? Yes, I get it. Number one, I totally get it. And this is what I do, though. I study these things, right, all over the world. And I'm watching the pieces get moved around, and I see how this big board is being organized. And it's not being organized in a sense that will leave the United States intact, right?
Well, I've got later tonight, I've got Michael or David Pine on. And one of the things I wanted to talk to him about was a recent study that shows what percentage of non-citizens voted in our last election. And when you figure out the number of non-citizens voting in our election, it's a big deal. I mean, they can take elections. But what if you saying it doesn't compute when we're talking about the need for cheap labor and more people in here, but then jobs are going to be taken by AI? Well, what if the goal isn't just working? What if the goal is voters? Is that one of their components?
We're way beyond voters. I've been saying this for years. I mean, I know the getting the voters in is helpful, and that's for them to do their things, their nefarious things. But we're way beyond that, way beyond voters. We're talking genocide. We're talking genocide, and I'm not exaggerating.
Okay,
that
so
word.
are you saying they're looking? Are you saying they're looking to replace the American population? They're going to genocide?
They don't hesitate to say it. I mean, they're crystal clear. I mean, look at Ireland. Sako and I went over there about 3 years ago.
So it is to change the entire American culture. So it really goes back to the cultural Marxist in 1933 when they got brought over, and they said Herbert Marcuse said, who coined the phrase "make love, not war." The old way of revolution is old-fashioned. The new way will be a diffused and dispersed disintegration of the system. And he talked about changing their culture. You erase the American culture, the patriarchal society, patriotism, sexual morality. Herbert Marcuse wrote a book on eros, sexual, perversion, really. We're going to push the envelope until we destroy the American culture. Well, one way you do it, as Michael Savage has said for years, border language culture. Open the borders. America no longer English. Borders, language, culture. So what you're saying is the importation is a multi-pronged strategy that includes erasing the U.S. Western culture as we know it.
And Japan. Yeah. I mean, it's not even hidden, actually. I mean, it's not hidden to a few of us because we're out here looking at it, physically looking at it, studying it, meeting the right people. And it's just at some point it's so obvious. It's as obvious as Godzilla walking into Tokyo. I mean, it's that obvious, I sent that to some Japanese friends recently, and I was saying it's this obvious, right? And like I got a message from a Japanese woman last night, and she said, they're doing the whole name change thing between, when a woman gets married, she, just keep her old last name. And she was analyzing that, the Japanese woman. She's saying the reason that they're doing that is to further erode. It's just another attack on Japanese culture, right? Another way to muddy Japanese lines, and also it's a way to kind of launder Chinese into the system. And she explained how you can do that. And anyway, it's interesting because Chinese are moving heavily into Japan. Japan now has a whole town called Kawaguchi. It's filled with Kurds. Misako and I went there last year. Kurds and Chinese. The Japanese call it Kawaguchi-stan, right? And so it's not just the United States, but the United States is the prize, because once the United States is gone, you can run the table, right? For those who play chess or fought much or whatever, you get to a certain point and you dominate, it's it. Now you've got the initiative and you can finish the board, right? In the United States, it's not about votes. We're way beyond votes. They don't care about votes. This is about genocide. And I mean kinetic genocide. And again, think about it. The jabs. I mean, people say that's the jabs, and they say that's an exaggeration. I say the jabs, right? Let's keep repeating that. The jabs. How many people do you hear have cancer now, right? They're dying. The jabs, right? So they wouldn't do genocide. The jabs. They have done it. They have just jabbed huge numbers of people around the world, and they're falling out of the trees like iguanas in the winter. I mean, they're dying everywhere, right?
Yep.
And constantly. And I just read anyway. At the end of the day, it's crystal clear what's happening. Food shortages are coming. It's a matter of time. I don't know how it's going to look, but that's one of the reasons I keep warning about the Darien Gap. With the Darien Gap, and they're building a road to Colombia now. And often, again, people will say, as I've mentioned to you before, they're going, that's impossible. They're not building a road. Okay, whatever. They're building a road, period. Full stop. I found it. They're definitely doing it, right? And what if you have famines in Asia or Africa or South America, that human osmotic pressure alone will squirt them by the tens of millions up to the Darien Gap. We know about 1.4 million came in just through the Darien Gap, which is very rough jungle, during Biden's time. About 1.4 million. That's a very accurate, based on a lot of information. It's a little bit of extrapolation, but it's guarantee it's within probably 5%. I mean, it's very close to the mark. About 1.4 million in those 4 years. You build a road there, and because they were coming through the Darien Gap. If you were to design a military obstacle to keep people away from you, it would be like, the Darien Gap. You might throw in a little more quicksand or something, but I mean, it would be the Darien Gap. And, a huge amount of people died coming through, but they just kept coming. There's bodies all over that jungle, right? And nobody knows how many died since Biden was installed. It would be way up in the thousands, and very easily in the thousands. Anyway, but they kept coming. What about when a road is built and then there's a famine? They will come over on ships like Camp of the Saints style. Eric Prince has got that idea about flying people back, which is fine. But I messaged Eric immediately on that. What ships? Use ships. We don't need airplanes. You send ships right up the Mississippi River. Send ships all inland. Send ships to all the ports: Houston, Miami, New York, San Francisco. Load them on ships. That's the only. If you're serious about this, there's two major.
Isn't that what they did? Isn't that what they did? And I hate to use the term. I'm sorry, but it was called Operation Wetback under Truman or Eisenhower. I think I'll have to look. Let me look it up. But isn't that what they did? They loaded them up on ships and took them out of the country.
I was talking with an old Mexican man a couple of years ago. I was on the Texas border, and he calls them wetbacks. He's like, he's kept talking about wetback. And he said, I was a wetback. He said, no, I got U.S. citizenship.
And for those who don't know, the term was because they were coming up out of the river, right?
Coming out of the river they were wet, right?
Yeah.
And he said, I was a wetback. He was like, I was straight. We called ourselves a wetback, and we still do. And it's not an insult. It's only an insult when the woke Americans started saying it's he said he still calls them wetbacks. He's like, there's a lot of wetbacks coming over. He said he was a wetback because he used to work up in the United States, and then he would cross the river and go home. He lived in Mexico.
It was Eisenhower.
He would literally do it. And that's the kind of people that's fine. I mean, that kind of migration, it's not really migration. It's just working back and forth. And that suits everybody. It benefits everybody. But what we're getting now is not about that. It's not about picking cantaloupes. It's about destroying the United States. You go to Canada now. Masako and I went from Vancouver and Toronto and up in Yellowknife, Northwest Territories, looking at Yellowknife. Look where Yellowknife is. Can you pull that up on a map? Look where Yellowknife is. It's up near the Arctic Circle, right? So we fly to Yellowknife. I hadn't been there in many years. It's way up there. It's the capital of Northwest Territories. Most Americans, I think, have never heard of Northwest Territories. It's massive, but it's very remote. And we go up there and we land, and the town of Yellowknife is now filled with Afghans and Pakistanis and Nigerians and whatnot. Like, how did you get here? How did you get here all the way to Yellowknife, IOM? International Organization for Migration, UN. IOM. Amy Pope from the UN IOM. If you look at her Twitter, we follow it daily. She's running around to Jordan and Chile. She was at the Vatican last week. She's continuing to keep in mind, even if we were to stop all the invasions into the United States, even if we were to do that, and the United Nations remains alive, they will continue to do this to all of our allies until they're all destroyed. Let's use Hungary as an example. If Hungary doesn't let anybody in, Masako and I went to Hungary and talked with government people about this. But even if Poland and Hungary don't let anybody in, just imagine, but the rest of Europe does, they're going to be overwhelmed. I mean, there's only so much until those other countries are overrun. And then that's it. Your borders don't exist. Yep. And you can't, little Hungary cannot defend those borders unless their neighbors their neighbors are peaceful with them. But as soon as other countries like Austria or Romania are taken over, and UNHCR is working hard and IOM is working hard on Österreich, and on Austria, and on Romania, right? They're working very hard. I talked to Georgescu a couple times, and Georgescu is the guy that's running for president and then facing prison. In fact, I arranged his interview with Sean Ryan, and had somebody pick up Sean at the airport in Bucharest. I mean, I'm tracking on what's going on. That Romania is under attack. All of Europe is under attack. So Hungary can push back for now, but at some point, and it's great. That's exactly what Hungary should do. It's a demonstration of courage, and they're fighting to the last straw. And but there's only so much that they can withhold if everybody else punks out to the United Nations. And that's what it comes down to. Keep in mind, there's many globalist structures here, right? And they overlap and they cooperate on some things and other things they don't. Many of these are like meta countries. They're like countries without countries, like these massive corporations like BlackRock. Is it American? What is it? I mean, no, it's a thing. It's a global thing, right? Yeah. And there's many of them like this, right?
Yep. Well,
so they don't need the United States. They don't need the United. They float above it, right?
Yes.
They don't need it. But they can influence it because they can buy presidents. They can buy half the Congress they want. Everybody, you know what I mean? They can, and they can buy a lot of influence, right? And they can do the same across Europe and all across Asia. And they're competing with other people who are trying to buy influence. So all of these, people that are in key positions now, they got, everybody's throwing gold at them because nobody's going to prison for this anymore. Nobody in the United States is going to prison for. Have you seen any top dogs go to prison for corruption in the United States?
Nope.
I mean, seriously, we should have probably half of Congress in prison right now, but nothing because you're free to do business. You're installed there, and here's your brick of gold. Now this is what I need.
I guess the only one we saw was the U.S. Senator Menendez, who actually had a brick of gold, but I think he's about the only one.
Did he actually have a brick of gold?
Well, I think it was. I think it was some gold. Yes, yes, I do. It was Eisenhower, Operation Wetback in the mid '50s. They ended up deporting about 1,074,000. They put a bunch of them on boats, as you were suggesting, and got them out of the country. I mean, this has been a fascinating interview. I could interview you obviously for hours on end. But what a fascinating interview, the history, the information. And I think we just covered a lot most people don't know. And I'll tell you something, we'll turn it into an article so that people can share it and digest it. We'll post the interview tomorrow morning as well. I mean, obviously we're going out now, but we want to repost it for people to watch again and share with friends. Fascinating. We appreciate all you're doing. And I hope people will follow you, Michael, at Michael_Yon. They can also support your work by going to michaelyon.com or at Michael_Yon. Fascinating.
Substack is the best. Substack.
Okay. Give me what is that? What is that?
It's just my name, Michael Yon on Substack. So I'm publishing on Substack pretty much daily now, and stuff that I'm not publishing or saying anywhere else. Like I published a couple in the last 24 hours with photos. I get helicopters and fly over the BlackRock facilities and that sort of thing. And and so I've spent a lot of time developing this network and knowledge base, and we see what's going on in many parts of the world that many people don't see.
Indeed you do. Get it, folks, right there. michaelyon.substack.com. Michael, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me on. I look forward to coming on again.
Absolutely. You can count on that, Michael. All right, folks, you just heard Michael warning about food. He warns about it every time he comes on here. Food supply, food supply, food supply. Well, he knows what I know. And I did a series a few years ago now on, 7 or 8 F's to control us. One of them was firearms, take your firearms, food, foreign invasion. I had all like 7 or 8 F's. Obviously, right up the top was finances and food. Folks, go to worldviewstore.com, as I started out tonight telling you. Get your emergency food. This is really good food. We've actually made it for people. Had them eat it, and then they didn't know it was freeze dried. They're like, "You realize that was freeze dried?" They're like, "What?" Yeah, that was freeze dried. It's real food. It's just freeze dried, and then you add hot water and bring it back to life. It's real food. Okay, you want to have this in emergencies, blizzards, snowstorms, cyber grid attack, EMP, whatever could happen. Right? You want to be hyperinflation. What do you think is going to happen to the grocery stores if we go to hyperinflation? What do you think? I'm not saying we will. I don't know what's going to happen. But I do know this. I'm not going to be dependent on the government. I don't care if it's natural disaster, man-made, terrorism, hyperinflation, banks closed for a while, whatever. I'm not going to be dependent on the government. Sorry. I've seen how that works out for people. Yeah, I have over a 2-year supply of food for my family, for the kids that work for me, for my friend who's a medical doctor, lives in my neighborhood, because I'm going to use that to help him, and he's going to help me as a medical doctor, right? I have a couple friends I know are very good shots. They would be great security. And I'm sure that I might be able to have them provide some services for protection should things get unruly when I have some extra buckets of food, right? There's a lot of things you could barter for. You should check it out, worldviewstore.com, worldviewstore.com. You heard Michael talking about that. But not just emergency food, you have emergency supplies. I'm talking gas mask, pepper spray, you have the 100-hour candles, we have indoor stoves, suture kits, 5-gallon collapsible water carriers, self-powered indoor space heater and stove. That top comes off, and you can actually cook on it with 6-hour canned heat. These are so cool. These are all in my, and then as a fan in there, the heat makes the fan turn, and you can heat a small room with it if you had to do that. You can also cook on it with that 6-hour canned heat, okay? So check it out. You can boil your water to make your freeze-dried food. These are all the supplies we have, some of these supplies. Water filters, water purifiers, medical kits. Think about the ability to make a fire with some twigs and kindling, put your pot on top of it, boil your water to make your food. Everybody should have a prepper kit, and you should be adding to it all the time. Some of this stuff you should have in your car, right? We need a nation of people being prepared. You'll find it all at worldviewstore.com, worldviewstore.com.